There are some things you might assume you've seen at the gas station: problematic kids, late-night customers, and even shoplifters. Could you tell me what transpired last Friday night at the Highway 23 corner stop? From now on, every time you visit a gas station, you will view it through the lens of that story. In this tale, 3 motorcyclists mistakenly believe they have located an easy target. They ended themselves confronting the one person they should have known better than to cross paths with. You know what it's like. Motorbikes pulling up to a gas station in the middle of the night. That low-level engine noise that makes some people anxious. How other clients seem to have an epiphany and decide to quit. How the cashiers clench their jaws when customers approach the register. Unfortunately, those motorcyclists chose the wrong person to threaten that night. Little did they know, the shy woman driving the blue Honda was actually Detective Laura Torres. Their entire world was going to be turned upside down by her. Here we have one of the largest gang takedowns in the history of the state, which began as a routine gas station stop. An entire criminal organization was brought to its knees when 3 troublesome bikers unintentionally set off an investigation. You must know how these naive crooks ensured their own doom, so let's go back to the beginning. Post a comment telling us from what part of the globe you're tuning in. Also, please subscribe if you found this article motivating. You won't believe what happens in tomorrow's story, so be sure to tune in. For the past 6 months, Detective Torres has been conducting covert operations to investigate a series of robberies at gas stations. It was completely unplanned for her to be at the corner stop that evening. Following a lengthy surveillance shift, she was exhausted, her gasoline tank was nearly empty, and she was returning to the precinct. Just a quick gas station stop. That was the only intention behind it. Long shadows stretched across the gas station lot's crumbling pavement as the sun dipped below the horizon. Between the pumps, puddles of harsh white light were formed as the fluorescent lights flickered on. With her unmarked Honda Civic, which appeared to be any ordinary commuter car, Torres pulled up to pump number 4. Nothing about her civilian attire, denim and a simple black t-shirt, would draw attention to her. As she had done for many years as a police officer, she kept her badge and service weapon hidden but close at hand. Through the glass, Danny Martinez, the young cashier on the inside, nodded at her, clearly exhausted. He was contemplating leaving his work after only 3 weeks on the job. After learning about the spate of robberies at nearby stations, the thought of working late into the night filled him with dread. Their ears perked up at that moment. The unique sound of motorbikes that have been extensively modified. As the sun began to set, 3 motorcycles sped into the parking lot, their chrome exhaust pipes reflecting the light. Behind their bandanas and shades, the bikers wore leather jackets adorned with patches, their expressions resolute. A large man with tattoos all over his arms parked his bike at an angle, purposefully obstructing the exit lane, and he was the leader. Torres said nothing. As if engrossed on her phone, her trained eyes continued to pump gas, taking in every aspect. The youngest rider, the one with the venom tattoo on his neck, was the one who caught her eye because he kept reaching under his vest to touch something. Exactly where the third rider, an older man with a gray beard, stood to keep an eye on the storefront and the street. There was a pattern to these troublemakers. They had prepared well. This was not their first rodeo. As Danny scanned the bikers in the store's security mirrors, he felt a tremor run through his entire body. He was familiar with their kind. His manager insisted on showing him the police bulletins. A notorious gang, the Night Serpents, set up protection rackets at neighborhood businesses by intimidating their employees. In the county, they had already attacked 3 additional gas stations. Despite the prohibited smoking signs at the pumps, the leader approached Torres and lit a smoke. "Good night," he replied, his voice betraying the usual air of sincere friendliness just before trouble arises. Torres nodded at him in a courteous but dismissive way, her actions measured and slow. On top of the leather and cigarette smoke, she detected the odor of alcohol on his breath. Then he became even more of a threat. Inebriated motorcyclists tended to be more dangerous. Well, the leader kept drawing nearer. You should not be out here by yourself, being such a beautiful woman. These days, there are a lot of hazardous people. His tobacco-stained yellow teeth gleamed as he grinned. The form of what Torres could only assume was a weapon was visible in his vest pocket, where his right hand repeatedly brushed across it. Within the establishment, the youthful motorcyclist adorned with a venom tattoo made his way to the register. As he asked, Danny did his best to maintain a steady voice. "Do you need any assistance, sir?" A chilly smile that didn't even reach the biker's eyes was all that was required of him. "All right, youngster. If you pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you about the current system here, you can assist us. For those in the police force, the events of the next minutes will live on in legend. Police academies would study it, training seminars would talk about it, and it would be presented as a fantastic illustration of how looks can be deceiving. On a more critical note, though, it would set in motion a series of events that would ultimately lead to the downfall of a statewide criminal organization. It seems like these motorcyclists had discovered their easy prey. A youthful clerk in a lonely station, a solitary woman at the pump for gas. On the contrary, they had unwittingly brought themselves into a predicament. Their lesson was about to change when they realized that the most dangerous person isn't always the one threatening. The one that stays low, watches everything, and waits for its chance to strike. To fully grasp how Detective Torres exposed the crooks, it is necessary to grasp the identity of the bikers and the reason behind their targeting of this specific gas station. Reason being, there were more than 3 guys trying to scare people. As a result of picking the incorrect woman to harass at a petrol station on a peaceful Friday night, a whole criminal empire was on the verge of collapsing. Now, let's delve into the identities of these bikers. The Night Serpents weren't your average neighborhood renegades. An even bigger criminal group that had been intimidating companies in 3 states had these as its enforcement arm. Marcus the Butcher Reeves, their leader and the man currently attempting to intimidate Detective Torres, was a 3-time offender with a 12-year state prison sentence for severe assault and armed robbery. A young man with a venom tattoo working the register. It was Martinez, Joey's venom. Unrelated to Danny, the cashier he was attempting to frighten at the moment. Joey was enthusiastic about using violence to establish his worth to the gang, which he had joined 6 months prior. However, this was news to Detective Laura Torres at the time. From her 8 years of experience in the criminal underworld, she knew that these individuals were extremely well organized and had extensive training in their maneuvers. Nobody was harassed at random. A well-thought-out operation was this. Peripheral vision allowed her to observe their successful containment of her vehicle and their strategic placement to restrict all available exits. Joey was becoming increasingly belligerent throughout the store. "Hey there, young man," he snarked at Danny. "This is really easy. You inform your boss that the Night Serpents have taken ownership of this station. We guarantee safety. Each week, you send us money. We deal with anyone who causes you problems." Under the bright lights of the fluorescent bulbs, his venom tattoo writhed as he leaned over the bar. "And believe me when I say you don't want us to cause further problems for you." Danny clutched the counter for support because his hands were trembling so violently. He had chosen this job solely to assist with education expenses. Although $9 an hour wasn't worth risking his life for, he was also aware that caving into their demands would ensure their eternal control over him and the station. The gray-bearded man they called Shade, Joey's friend, was watching him closely as he frantically searched for the emergency button behind the counter. Reeves stalked Torres's vehicle outside like a shark looking for prey. "Do you know my opinion?" His voice grew lower and more intimidating as he spoke. "We should probably go for a short ride, in my opinion. This dull automobile is no match for my thrilling motorcycle." He smudged the shiny paint of the Honda's hood as he brushed his fingers along it. "My darling, what is your opinion? Are you curious about the sensation of true power?" A small shrug of Torres's shoulders gave the impression that she was afraid, which caused Reeves to widen his smile. However, she was meticulously noting every element in her thoughts. A gun, most likely a .45 caliber, was seen under his vest. An appropriately sized blade was concealed in his boot. He had backup close by because of the radio clip on his belt. At this moment, she had to wait, yet every bit of information may be used later. She had activated a quiet alarm on her phone, and 2 patrol cars were already on their way. Just 3 or 4 more minutes. Until reinforcements came, all she had to do was prevent the situation from getting worse. A patient person, she had learned during her years of covert work. Recognizing when to do nothing was the most challenging aspect of every operation. Joey had pranced behind the counter and invaded Danny's personal space inside. "Here we go again, young man. What will it be? Do you intend to approach this with intelligence?" At this point, Shade had blocked the entrance to the store, and his enormous stature projected a shadow that reached the counter. As Danny struggled to recall his training, a chill ran down his spine. The manager had instructed him to simply cooperate in such a situation, but last week he had also set up that new silent alarm system. The fact that Danny had his right foot firmly planted on the floor panel beneath the counter, a direct line to police dispatch, went unnoticed by Joey and Shade. Another thing that went unnoticed was his habit of looking past them, not at the door but at the little security camera perched above it. This particular camera had been refurbished only last week so it could stream live footage directly to the police headquarters. Outside, Reeves was growing increasingly agitated. The scent of whiskey on his breath became more apparent to Torres as he drew nearer. He scowled, dismissing the opportunity to be cordial. Things start to turn ugly after this. He reached for his vest, where he stashed a concealed weapon. Torres could see the headlights on the highway behind him, but they were still too far away to be of much use. For a long time afterward, what transpired would be the subject of discussion among law enforcement officials. In police academies, it would be dissected frame by frame and discussed in training lectures. The trio of Butcher Reeves, Shade, and Venom Joey were on the verge of discovering the costly consequences of jumping to conclusions. What they failed to realize was that Detective Torres had not merely stumbled upon this petrol station. Because of a huge multi-state investigation into the Night Riders protection racket, this station was being monitored along with 12 others, therefore she had picked it out on purpose. Those cameras weren't merely capturing footage. In order to help a task force that had been gathering evidence for months, they were providing live footage. What about the young, anxious cashier behind the counter? Despite working nights, Danny Martinez was more than just a college student. He was a police intern strategically situated to play the part these bikers anticipated. Emerging, frightened, and susceptible. His every trembling look and hand gesture was an act designed to instill a sense of command and confidence in the group. As the night serpents approached the trap's closing, it was ready to fall. However, before anything else, Reeves was about to commit one last, disastrous error. As he began to remove it from his vest, his hand tightened on the handle of his concealed weapon. "My time with you has come to an end," he growled at Torres. "It would have been more polite for you to accept the ride when I offered it." Then things started to shift. It was at this time when Marcus the Butcher Reeves found out the shy woman he had been attempting to frighten wasn't scared at all. All she had been waiting for was for him to give her the proof she needed to bring his entire operation crashing down at this very moment. When Reeves's hand made contact with his weapon, Torres's entire demeanor changed. The expression of terror and slouched shoulders had vanished. With a subtle change, her weight was distributed evenly on both feet, creating a casual posture that camouflaged a fighter's stance. Her voice was so authoritative that it made Reeves mistrust her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she added. As they entered the store, Joey and Shade could not help but notice that their leader's body language had changed. There was a problem. Just as Joey was about to reach for his own firearm, Danny's anxious demeanor faded away. His trembling hands became more steady as he shifted behind the counter, away from the panic button he had previously hit, and toward another object. A police officer's hand should be visible to me. The command from Torres resounded like thunder in the late twilight sky. On her left hand, her badge materialized. She calmly aimed her service pistol at Reeves's chest as it materialized to her right. Reeves paused, his weapon barely partially removed from its hiding spot, because the metamorphosis occurred so quickly. Reeves growled, "You're bluffing," but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. As he calculated odds and distances, his gaze swung to his bike. In his rearview mirror, he could make out flashing red and blue lights as the first patrol vehicle pulled into the parking lot. Within, Joey executed his move, the erroneous one. As if he were about to kidnap a terrified clerk, he lunged across the counter toward Danny. Danny deftly sidestepped, drawing on his expertise from the police academy, and he ended up gazing down the barrel of a tiny Glock. "Do it now," Danny said from the ground. Shade attempted to flee. He erred in that decision. Just as he was about to enter the store, the front doors swung open, and 3 uniformed tactical officers rushed in, their rifles drawn. "No way. The time has come to descend." As Shade gingerly lifted his hands, a mix of perplexion and anger visible on his face, the orders reverberated through the linoleum and glass floor. Reeves wasn't about to give up so easy outside. "You have no idea who you're against." With his grip still on his weapon, he rumbled at Torres. "This is just the beginning of what's in store for you." Torres remained unfazed. She had learned to read men like him over her 8 years of undercover work. Confidence on the outside, fear on the inside when the tables were turned. She spoke calmly, "Marcus the Butcher Reeves," as she watched his eyes widen in surprise at being called by his full name. Wanted in 3 states for extortion, assault, and racketeering, currently serving as Sergeant-at-Arms for the Night Serpents, convicted felon 3 times. "Have faith, we are fully aware of your identity." Then, you are correct. I have company. Peruse your surroundings." As more and more police vehicles pulled into the lot, cops sprang out, guns blazing. However, the story was truly told by the unidentified automobiles. Law enforcement agencies at the federal, state, and local levels. This wasn't your average small-town arrest. Months of preparation went into this well-coordinated raid on a criminal organization. "A final opportunity," Torres declared, her voice resonating through the increasingly congested parking lot. "Things are about to become ugly if you don't put down your weapon and get down on the ground." After a brief pause, she said with a subtle smile, "Being cordial is now out of the question." In a fit of wrath, Reeves saw his own comments being turned around on him. He pulled his rifle free with an angry shout. Torres then demonstrated to him the practical application of his 8 years of SWAT training. She had already made a move before his weapon passed his vest. The weapon was knocked out of his hand by her initial strike. The second one threw him off his stride. His fourth move, a leg sweep straight out of a textbook, knocked him down. The butcher was on the ground, face down, with Torres's knee behind him in 3 short seconds as she silently read him his rights. Joey, who appeared both younger and more terrified as the gravity of his predicament became clear, was already in handcuffs inside. Near the door, Shade lay face down, covered by many officers who were securing him. With his own weapon now securely holstered, Danny stood behind the counter and called in the situation using all the appropriate codes and protocols of a professional cop. It was only the start, though. Reason being, additional police cars were gathering at various spots across the city as Reeves, Shade, and Joey were being carried into separate patrol cars. The altercation at the petrol station was but a sliver of a much larger enterprise. Night rider clubhouses in 3 counties were served with search warrants at the same time that Torres was securing her inmates. The 3 individuals were unaware that directional microphones and high-definition cameras had recorded their every word and threat. There was more than just compelling proof. It was too much. One of the police vehicles carried a person they knew well. he had been an informant for 3 months and was a lieutenant with the Night Serpents. Things were only going to get worse from here. While Torres observed the final patrol vehicle go, her radio jangled with reports emanating from several raid sites. Nothing was causing the operation to go wrong. After years of harassment, assault, and illegal activity, 3 bikers couldn't help but harass a gas station they believed would be easy prey. The night, however, had not yet finished. Because what they had apprehended here was more than simply 3 offenders. They had discovered the secret that, when released, would bring down a whole criminal dynasty. Laura Torres, the detective, was only at the beginning of her journey. In the booking section of the police station, there was a flurry of activity. As officers processed evidence from other raid locations, Reeves sat in the main holding cell, his once confident swagger replaced by boiling hatred. In the adjacent cell, a hunched-over figure, Shade, was already requesting to speak with his attorney. Joey, whose youth and lack of experience were on full display as fear took hold, walked restlessly in his cell. As Torres passed his cell, Reeves yelled out, "You have no idea what you've done. Never forget, Night Serpents. We have individuals in every corner." His warnings dissolved as Torres hesitated, turning to face him with a subtle smile. She remarked, "It's funny you should mention that," as she opened a folder which she was holding. "We may discuss such individuals now." She proudly displayed a snapshot that had been shot at the petrol station 21 days prior. In the scene, Reeves meets with a stranger and hands them an envelope. Who can forget Tony? "Hey there, reliable lieutenant." As Torres went on, Reeves's face became pale. "He has been collaborating with us for months, and we have recorded every meeting, transaction, and threat." Danny sat with 2 FBI agents in the questioning room, his credential as a police intern now prominently displayed on his chest. As he reviewed his notes, he noted that they followed the exact pattern that we had anticipated. Just like in the other station's security footage, Reeves deals with intimidation outside while Joey and Shade handle the interior. As tactical teams were hitting backup locations, Torres's partner of the last 3 years, Detective Sarah Chen, was coordinating with them down the hall. She announced over the radio that we had their primary warehouse. There are records of every company they have been extorting as well as weapons, narcotics, and stolen goods. It all started with Joey. Tell every cop who would listen that he wants a bargain. Listen, I'll spill the beans. Who is receiving bribes, and where are they located? Chen and Torres shared knowing glances. They thought the youth would be the one to mess things up in the gang. That is why they would grant him a brief opportunity to view the evidence being presented. The 3rd interview room was prepared, Chen informed her companion. Before our young friend starts making promises, would you like us to tell him what we already know? Several large files were retrieved from Torres's desk as she nodded. Named Operation Nightfall on one of them. The Night Serpents would be dismantled piece by piece through 6 months of surveillance, witness statements, and bank records. Shade, confined to his cell, watched the proceedings with increasing terror. He earned his position as her enforcer after 15 years of service with the Night Serpents, beginning with Prospect. Their organization was massive, and he could see everything crumbling before his eyes. He spoke up as soon as Torres walked up to his cell. "I won't say anything until I see my lawyer," he said with a scowl. "Indeed, you are correct." In agreement, Torres proceeded to display a laptop with security footage. "However, would you want to view some highlights in the meantime?" Shade had been performing the same intimidating act at different gas stations for the last 3 months, as shown on the television. "We have 28 victims, 12 stations, and the audio of every threat you made is crystal clear." At this point, the night shift had fully begun. Reports came in from raid teams across the city, prompting more officers to arrive and evaluate the evidence. There was a mountain of evidence found at the Night Serpents clubhouse, including books detailing protection payments, directories of corrupt officials, and drug trafficking routes. Standing in the observation room, Captain Rodriguez observed as Joey started his formal statement. For what amount of time have you been formulating your strategy? Torres and Chen, he inquired. Following 6 months of close observation, Chen responded. However, the case has been developed for more than a year. What we needed tonight was given to us by these three. Captured by many cameras, their methods is clearly demonstrated. The gas station, Torres continued, was ideal, secluded enough for them to feel safe making direct threats, yet entirely within our control. It was all orchestrated, down to the precise timing of the backup response and each and every camera and microphone. With a slight grin on her face, she paused. They appeared on a stage that had been put up specifically for them. During the third interview room, Joey's confidence had entirely evaporated. He pointed to several places on a map and claimed it was all Reeves' idea. It all began with the petrol stations. After construction sites, we planned to enter restaurants. Someone would get hurt if they didn't pay. Special Agent Thompson of the FBI was already in the hallway outside liaising with offices in nearby states. He informed the local cops that there are chapters of the Night Serpents in 5 states. Your catch tonight provides us with enough evidence to proceed with each of them. We will capture their entire command structure before daybreak. What appeared to be a modest warehouse was actually the evidence processing room. The seized documents, narcotics, and firearms filled the tables. By taking pictures and making detailed inventories, forensic specialists were able to construct a solid case that would guarantee the utmost punishments for all parties. Recall that Reeves mentioned the idea of having someone in every corner? While going over the confiscated paperwork, Chen questioned Torres. To some extent, he was correct. They have local legislators, judges, and police officers on staff. She raised a ledger. This time, though, we have their identities straight. Reeves had ceased threatening in his cell. After finally grasping the whole extent of what had transpired, he sat quietly, observing the goings-on around him. Stopping at the petrol station wasn't out of the blue. No one was shooting at the third woman at random. There was more to the anxious clerk than meets the eye. It was as if he and his team had stepped into a meticulously laid trap. The thought that the same thing was happening at this very moment in other police stations in 3 different states was enough to keep him up at night. They were also booking other Night Serpents. We were also processing other evidence. To ensure their own survival, other members were negotiating bargains. Because they had chosen the incorrect target at a gas station, the empire he had helped build was falling apart. As Torres and Chen went over their findings, Special Agent Thompson scattered photographs all over the conference room table. The Night Rider's intimidating methods were shown on silent displays erected on the walls, which had footage from security cameras at dozens of petrol stations. However, the discovery at the clubhouse was the turning point that completely unraveled the case. Check this out, Chen remarked, gesturing toward an intricate ledger. Running protection rackets wasn't all they did. This was corporate-level organized crime. With great care, she turned the pages of the immaculate documents. Their every extortion attempt, corrupt official payment, and drug transport is meticulously recorded. The revelations began pouring in after Joey's confession. In his desperation to strike a contract, he described the Night Rider's operations for 3 hours without interruption. He explained, his voice quivering, that the petrol stations were merely the public face. The real goal was to move stuff, but we made it appear like harmless intimidation. Every station that was under our control turned into a distribution hub. Torres bent down to examine the face of the juvenile gang member. Detail the shipments for me. Joey looked anxiously at his lawyer, who gave him a shaky nod. Consistently, on Tuesdays and Fridays, regular. Members of the group own Mountain Valley Transport, a trucking firm. The first shipments are legitimate, whereas the second ones contain the narcotics. Computers and mobile devices confiscated from the clubhouse were being examined by forensics teams in the evidence room. The IT expert said that they were using an encrypted chat software, but they were careless with it. Screenshots of everything were preserved by Reeves. Drug shipments, arms sales, and even murder contracts have been brought up in our chats. When presented with the proof, Shade ultimately spoke out. He informed Torres, "You don't understand," while he was still inside enemy bars. "You have no idea how high this goes. All we are, the night serpents, is muscle. Above us, there sits the true power." In a little way, Torres grinned. "Is that Judge Hamilton or Senator Morrison you speak of? Rest assured, we are also well versed in them." As Torres displayed other images, Shade's expression became increasingly pale. In the photos, well-known people met with the Night Serpent's leadership, exchanged gifts, and had private chats. "What can be captured with directional microphones and high-powered lenses is quite remarkable," Torres remarked. As the scope of the operation became apparent, Captain Rodriguez convened an emergency briefing. He informed the assembled cops that the mission had expanded beyond simply apprehending a motorcycle gang. "Every level of local government is involved in the illegal organization that we have exposed. I want every evidence to be recorded and protected. Some will attempt to erase this from existence." Joey continued to speak when they returned to the interview room. As he pointed us a map marked with red dots, he explained that the protection racket was simply the first phase. Every gas station that we managed turned into a central node. We would then establish distribution networks, pressure other local businesses into joining, and launder money through seemingly genuine stores as we grew. Chen used her laptop to access CCTV footage. "Keep an eye on their pattern," she instructed Agent Thompson. "Vulnerable targets are always where they begin. Establishments open late, remote sites, lone workers. They will utilize those locations as bases to extend their dominion once they get control of them." As the night progressed, additional evidence began to trickle in from raids all throughout the city. Cops found secret chambers in the clubhouse with documents dating back years, meticulous records of every illicit business the Night Serpents had been involved with, but the digital evidence was the most damning. The tech analyst was astounded as he or she flipped through encrypted information, meetings, transactions, and threats stored on their private servers. Because they felt completely protected, they even left behind their own trail of evidence. While incarcerated, Reeves ceased all verbal communication. As the officers escorted the stack of evidence that would land him in prison for decades, he observed in his cell the steady stream of boxes bearing the incriminating evidence. After finally grasping the full extent of what that innocent gas station stop had set in motion, the ruthless motorcycle boss who had terrified a city fell into a state of quiet. The evidence from Danny's contact at the gas station was helped by Danny, who was still wearing his uniform as a police intern. He said that nobody had ever suspected anything. Intimidation, threats, and the full protection racket spiel were all part of their standard operating procedure. Except this time, the audio was crystal clear and recorded in high definition. Through the night, Torres and Chen were able to piece together clues that had eluded authorities for a long time. There was a complex criminal organization that had infiltrated every level of local society, and the Night Serpents were just the enforcement arm of that organization. And now, all because of 3 narcissistic motorcyclists at a petrol station, that structure was ready to crumble. Do you realize the irony? As they analyzed additional surveillance footage, Chen spoke to Torres. Maybe we would have never caught them if they weren't so predictable and haughty with their tactics. However, they became accustomed to it and began to believe they were impregnable. While viewing a different video depicting the gang's typical intimidation technique, Torres gave a nod. Once people start thinking they're unstoppable, that's usually how things turn out. When that happens, they mess up. The evidence room had transformed into a war room, with photographs and documents covering every surface. Traces linked individuals and companies to various crimes, including money laundering and corrupt public officials. At its core was a photograph taken at the gas station, depicting 3 motorcyclists who, naively believing they were carrying out again another regular intimidation, had no idea they were actually setting their own group on fire. The initial slew of search warrants arrived just as the sun was rising over the city. At the same time, police teams raided hundreds of properties linked to the night riders' activities, including residences, companies, and storage facilities. The Federal Bureau of Investigations showed up at Senator Morrison's door while he was sipping his morning coffee. As Judge Hamilton stepped out of the shower, his residence was raided by the police. Hour by hour, the carefully built veneer of respectability crumbled. As Detective Chen reviewed the clubhouse's confiscated financial documents, he quietly whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." Using petrol stations as transfer locations, Mountain Valley Transport wasn't only carrying narcotics, they were also shipping firearms up the coast. Manifests for shipments were scattered about her workstation. There was an opportunity to move product with every gasoline delivery. As Joey persisted with his marathon confession, Torres observed from the observation window. Hours of back and forth between the young motorcyclist led to further search warrants and arrests. He spoke in a raspy voice about how brilliant the trucking company was. An ideal cover story would be to question a gasoline truck at a petrol station, especially if all of the drivers were either members or associates of the group. The same revelation was being faced by members of the Night Serpents in prison cells all around the city. They were seeing their organization crumble before their eyes. There was a mountain of evidence. The meticulous documentation that had been prepared over the years to safeguard their interests was now being utilized to undermine them. During the emergency briefing, Captain Rodriguez announced the appointment of 6 judges. There are 12 police officers spread over 3 different departments. We have 4 state representatives working for the Night Rider as their employee. He displayed a ledger. They documented each and every favor, payment, and compromise. This is everything. A conference room was commandeered by forensic accountants from the FBI, who were tracking money trails that led to dozens of shell firms. The petrol stations were merely the beginning, as one individual informed Torres. They were able to launder money through fuel sales, fabricate delivery records, and form connections that looked real once they had control of those. In a criminal sense, it was great. Upon Shade's arrival, his attorney wasted no time in reviewing the material and starting to explore possible plea deals. He informed the prosecution that his client is prepared to testify. Details regarding the structure of the organization, including names, dates, and places. The Spectre slouched in his seat. Now, at 57 years old, the strong biker and force looks every bit the part. The prosecution's case was built around Danny's film from the gas station. Keep an eye on their meticulousness. While the video was playing again, Torres informed the assembled task force. Everything is scripted, down to the smallest detail. Dozens of times, they have done this. This time, though, we were prepared. As additional information surfaced, the magnitude of the corruption became clearer. While attaching an additional photo to the evidence board, Chen clarified that the Night Serpents were involved in more than just bribing officials. Blackmailing them was also part of it. As insurance against future wrongdoing, the group preserved proof of every corrupt judge and nasty cop they encountered. Upon seeing Senator Morrison being led through the station in handcuffs, Reeves ultimately requested the presence of his counsel. Cooperation was now the only option for the once inspiring biker boss, who realized the mighty had fallen. The more proof he gave, the more glum his attorney seemed. According to what Agent Thompson told Torres, the most interesting aspect is how they expanded their region by utilizing genuine enterprises. They turned each petrol station they had control over into a center for various activities. Distribution of drugs, laundering of funds, and collection of intelligence. They set up a network in plain sight. Word of the operation had spread to the media. A phalanx of news vehicles, their antennas jutting out like metal trees, gathered outside the police station. Inside, cops moved quickly to seize confidential information while journalists attempted to make sense of the arrests of a state senator, several judges, and scores of business owners. On one level, it's stunning. Chen looked at the organizational chart they had made and thought. A web of red lines linked businesses, crimes, and suspects across 3 states. They meticulously documented their every move as they crafted this complex criminal operation, leaving behind their own trail of evidence. Getting them once was all that was required. As additional individuals were taken into custody, Torres gave a silent nod. Plus, we received it from the gas station. We had all the pieces we needed to begin piecing together their story: perfect probable cause, video evidence of several felonies, and details about their methods. Computers and phones were still being processed by technicians in the evidence room. With each new gadget opened came fresh leads, crimes, and suspects. The Night Rider was soon to meet their demise due to their fixation on documenting. All possible threats, deals, and criminal conspiracies have been meticulously documented, archived, and organized. Do you know what will hurt them the most? As he helped sort evidence files, Danny made a statement. Their haughtiness. They believed no one dared to challenge them because they were so sure of their might. Because they believed it would make them untouchable, they recorded everything. Photos, documents, and connection charts filled the walls of the evidence room, which caused the day shift cops to halt in their tracks as they arrived. It appeared as though the night crew was both weary and content. 3 motorcyclists' decision to harass the incorrect person at a petrol station led to the discovery of a criminal scheme involving high-ranking officials in the local government within 12 hours. Quite a shambles, that news conference. Reporters from 3 different states had converged on the police headquarters. As he detailed the largest corruption scandal in the history of the city, their cameras were fixed on Captain Rodriguez. He revealed that a massive criminal business including organized crime, crooked authorities, and systematic extortion had been uncovered as a result of what started as a normal operation at a local gas station. As reporters hurriedly jotted down notes, Torres and Chen stood behind the podium. In order to preserve the current inquiry, the captain was cautiously revealing just enough to appease the reporters. However, the disinfected version was still lethal. Online news outlets had already run headlines. The bust of a motorcycle gang reveals political corruption, while a sting operation at a petrol station topples a criminal dynasty. On the TV in the holding cells, Joey observed the news conference from inside the station. The realization that this had become public caused his face to turn pale. "I'm going to die because of them." With his forehead pressed against the bars, he mumbled something. "I will be dead once this makes it to the news." Torres halted to confront him as he was passing by. "We will ensure your safety only if you cease speaking and continue to cooperate." Senate Morrison's procession to a waiting transportation van stoked the media's flames. Photographers panned the famous politician as he attempted to cover his face, all while still dressed in his morning robe. The barrage of reporters yelling questions rendered his lawyer's speech unintelligible. "Check this out." Chen summoned Torres to her desk. Photos of night serpents visiting charity events, posing with politicians, and accepting community service awards began appearing on local news websites. Torres noted how diligently they labored to establish a credible front. They were secretly running a criminal empire while posing as a motorcycle club that undertook charity work. It seems likely that one of the corrupt cops was responsible for the leak of the gas station tape prior to their arrest. With millions of views, it was quickly becoming viral. The video captured the precise moment Torres identified herself as a law enforcement official, and Reeves's expression of disbelief quickly became a viral meme. Clues were flying around on social media. People who had been taken advantage of by the Night Rider were speaking up. All over the state, gas station owners have reported the same consistent patterns of harassment and threats. With each new piece of evidence, the prosecution's case was strengthened. Agent Thompson came racing into the command center to announce that there was an issue. Witnesses are being threatened by someone. Just now, 3 gas station owners who have lodged complaints got the same message, asking them not to speak out. The 2 men, Torres and Chen, locked eyes. They had anticipated this very thing. The imprisoned night serpents were under increasing strain. Many members were eager to strike bargains once the evidence started trickling out. All morning, Shade's attorney met with prosecutors to discuss the possibility of Shade's evidence being used against higher-ranking members in return for immunity and a lighter sentence. Investigative specials about the Night Riders past aired on local television stations. They pretended to be a real motorcycle club at community gatherings, as seen on old news video. Surveillance footage of criminal acts was superimposed over photos of them with famous people. Captain Rodriguez informed Torres and Chen that we might benefit from the public perception viewpoint. The more people who see something, the more difficult it will be to remove it. There are now too many observers. There was non-stop coverage of the developing scandal on television, he signaled. The media's attention had unexpectedly shifted to Danny. His portrayal of an undercover intern who contributed to dismantling a criminal organization was riveting to see on television. Managing the young cop's unexpected popularity with care, the department's public information officer was already fielding interview requests. A statewide probe into gas station corruption had been initiated by the night's actions. Similar trends were being sought after by other police departments as they reviewed complaints. Criminal groups may have taken a page out of the Night Serpent's playbook when it came to their methods. With each fresh revelation, Reeves' visage darkened as he watched the media circus from his cell. Under intense public scrutiny, the organization he had helped establish and the power structure he had believed to be impenetrable were being uncovered. The reputation of the Night Rider was further damaged with each news article, video, and photo that was published. What is truly intriguing? While watching yet another news update, Chen spoke to Torres. Their terrifying presence vanished as soon as people stopped being scared of them. A single video showing their humiliation at a gas station was all it needed to inspire everyone to speak up. An excessive number of calls were received by the department's tip line. Additional victims, eyewitnesses, and even some ex-Night Serpents were coming forward with details. With each new call, the inquiry was able to uncover more about the organization's full extent of operations. The news had reached a national level by midday. The footage was being picked up by major news networks, which were scrutinizing each frame of the takedown. Experts in criminal justice went on television to describe the gas station operation as a textbook example of precise timing and covert work. Recall that Reeves mentioned the idea of having someone in every corner. As Torres watched yet another news story, he pondered. He was correct, they really do have personnel all over the place, and word has gotten out about who they are. Photos of officials who had been detained and linked to the Night Serpents through recorded favors and payments covered the evidence board behind her. A domino effect was being set in motion by the media coverage. More and more individuals came forward as information became public. The public's exposure was causing the Night Riders' carefully built environment of fear and silence to crumble. An altercation at a gas station escalated into a major news event in 3 different states. Witnesses encircled the federal courthouse as prosecutors initiated the presentation of evidence to the grand jury. The testimony of Joey had unleashed a torrent within. As he implicated politicians, judges, and corporate executives, his voice quivered as he described the operations of the Night Rider for 6 hours in a row. Using a city map as an example, he clarified that it wasn't limited to gas stations. Every station resembled a stronghold. We would extend our control once it was under our grip. Food establishments, auto repair businesses, building firms. Security deposits were required of all individuals. As Joey exposed the extent of the corruption, the prosecutors glanced at each other. While the FBI teams followed the money route, Chen coordinated their efforts at police headquarters. As she strewned financial documents around her desk, she proclaimed, "Look at this pattern." The same sequence was displayed at every gas station under their control. To begin with, gas station revenue would fall as honest buyers avoided the store. Next thing you know, there's a dramatic uptick in the use of cash. Money laundering wasn't their only crime. They built their own consumer base by instilling terror. As another member of the Night Serpents resorted to breaking under questioning, Torres saw from the observation window. According to the motorcyclist, the protection racket was only the start. We became the masters of a neighborhood as soon as we took over the petrol station. Humans required fuel. Nobody could have evaded us. The scene was set well. As the organization crumbled, the evidence room served as a nerve center for monitoring the situation. Documents and photos adorned every surface. Red strings tying suspects to crimes. As more and more members betrayed their superiors in an effort to escape, fresh information emerged hourly. Morrison, the senator, is prepared to speak. Agent Thompson has burst into the room, he announced. We will receive everything, according to his lawyer. Details, timelines, financial accounts, the entire shady system. Torres gave a stiff nod. This was what they had anticipated. The mighty always attempted to bring others down with them once they started to fall. Particularly damning was Shade's testimony. Being an enforcer for quite some time, he was familiar with the locations of all the graves. Seriously, in certain instances. Prosecutors were adding fresh counts by the hour as he outlined the Night Rider's transformation from a motorcycle club to a criminal empire. Shade elaborated on how brilliant the petrol stations were. He has shed his tough guy persona entirely. Natural gas is essential for all living things. At some point, you will have to stop. Plus, once we had the stations under our control, we could see who walked through the doors. Having cameras on every corner would have been worse. The scope of the probe had increased Danny's responsibilities. He was an invaluable witness due to his impeccable recollection of discussions and happenings. He informed the prosecutors that they were very sure of themselves. No one ever dared to challenge them, they thought. That's the reason behind their brazen threats. Dominoes kept falling. While answering questions, Judge Hamilton sobbed and said that he had accepted bribes for years to dismiss charges against Night Rider members. Officers admitted to turning a blind eye to illegal activity. Reports of extortion and threats were made public by business owners. As Chen updated the evidence board, he made the comment that it was like seeing a house of cards collapse. The chain reaction continues with each new confession leading to 3 more arrests. Fear was the foundation of their organization, but as it crumbled, Reeves gave in to the growing facts. Attempting to extract some value from the chaos, his attorney negotiated all night long. But the prosecution refused to budge. All the evidence pointed to a life sentence for him. Full collaboration is necessary for every agreement. When other cities started to see the same trends, the investigation grew. An increase in protection rackets, petrol station corruption, and motorcycle gangs. Criminal groups all throughout the nation had taken a page out of the Night Serpent's playbook. Do you want to know what's most terrifying? Torres informed Chen as they continued to examine the evidence. Any city, at any gas station, this could be happening. By honing a system that was nearly undetectable to the naked eye, they accomplished their goal. Merchants in the area started speaking out, detailing how the Night Serpents had quietly colonized their areas. There was always a petrol station in the beginning. In charge of the fuel, in charge of the community. Efficient, straightforward, and almost hard to turn down. As they tracked funds through a maze of front businesses, the forensic accountants at the Federal Bureau of Investigations were putting in extra hours. More and more transactions led them to new leads, suspects, and crimes. The Night Serpent's criminal empire was more than that. A shadow economy had been established by them. The public's reaction, upon learning the full extent of the corruption, was a mixture of shock and wrath. People wanted to know if there were any more petrol stations, motorcycle gangs, or protection rackets that should be investigated. No one had previously recognized a civilization weakness before the Night Serpent's methods revealed it. While briefed on the matter, Chen advised thinking about it. Criminals love to congregate at gas stations. They take a lot of money, are open late, and everyone needs to use them at some point. Maintain command over the stations, the area, and enough number of neighborhoods. A web of interconnected patterns was emerging from the inquiry. The takeover of each gas station proceeded in the same manner. Threat, command, growth. After years of experimenting, the night serpents had perfected their technique to the point where it was both effective and hard for others to notice. When forensic accountants uncovered a covert network of offshore accounts, the inquiry took a sharp turn. These aren't merely company files. While distributing papers around Torres' desk, the lead accountant proceeded to explain. The night serpents' use of gas station profits to fund their shadow banking structure was extensive. Perfect for a money laundering operation, each controlled gas station had been inflating its cash transactions. The laundering of illicit monies was accomplished through the manipulation of fuel sales, car washes, and convenience shop transactions. The scheme's efficacy was due to its simplicity. Pay attention to this scheme. Chen indicated the records of transactions. The gasoline trucks would reliably show up on Tuesdays and Fridays, but their cargo was more than simply petrol. They were updating the books, dropping off narcotics, and picking up cash. The operation was actually a mobile banking scam posing as a regular gas delivery. Additional lines of inquiry were made possible by Joey's testimony. He told federal prosecutors that the trucking company was involved in more than just goods transportation. Mobile bankers best described those drivers. Their job was to keep everyone in order by collecting protection money and distributing payoffs. You could tell it was time to pay when a truck from Mountain Valley Transport pulled up to your station. Secret communications between Night Serpent's top brass were deciphered by an FBI cyber unit. The IT analyst detailed how they made use of a bespoke app. It appeared to be a database of fuel prices at first glance, but when they entered the correct code, it revealed all of their illicit activities. The pricing of gas were actually codes for various medications. As further evidence was presented, Torres observed. The identical pattern has been observed by security cameras installed at dozens of fueling stations. Arrival of fuel trucks, short talks in rear offices, and the passing of goods. To the untrained eye, what appeared to be ordinary commerce was really a complex criminal activity. Their ability to remain undetected was truly brilliant. "Wow," said Agent Thompson. "No one ever stops a fuel truck at the pump to ask questions. At a convenience store, no one gives a second thought to paying with cash. Their entire business was based on taking advantage of people's blind spots." After assisting in the discovery of comparable patterns at additional sites, Danny's responsibilities were broadened. He reviewed the surveillance tape and said that it was evident once you knew what to look for. Everything about their positioning, delivery schedules, and staff targeting is systemic. The organizational structure was exposed by the testimony of the Shade. According to him, there was a specific order to the stations. The seemingly authoritative clerk was often only putting on a show. In most cases, a rough-looking person who pretended to be a regular customer was actually the boss. The goal was to make everything appear ordinary. Unexpected locations were reached along the money trail. Establishments that serve as a cover for illicit revenues include fine dining establishments, automobile dealerships, and even philanthropic organizations. According to what Chen saw, they weren't simply lawbreakers. With petrol stations serving as their banks, they were constructing a new economic system. When presented with the financial proof, Reeves at last supplied the missing piece. "You don't understand," he informed Torres while interrogating. In addition to being places of business, the gas stations were also hubs for intelligence collecting. "We were aware of every single transaction taking place within our regions, including regular customers, delivery schedules, and payment card swipes." The Night Serpent's expansion map was exposed by the probe. During a briefing, Chen revealed that they began by targeting stations near highway exits before moving on to residential areas. "To the extent possible, we controlled local travel patterns when selecting each site." The evidence of Senator Morrison revealed the political dimension. According to his admission, they approached me 5 years ago, claiming they could get votes in specific areas. They had complete control over who could purchase gas in those locations, so it took me months to figure out they could provide. One section of the FBI that was keen on the fuel delivery system was the Organized Crime Unit. They built a whole underground system of transit. As Agent Thompson detailed, those trucks crossed state lines undetected while transporting cash, narcotics, and data. Amazing and horrifying all at the same time. During his third interview, Judge Hamilton completely lost it. He admitted that they were aware of everything. They were keeping tabs on every purchase I made, from gas to coffee. Data security was paramount, not merely for financial reasons. In other cities, comparable trends surfaced as the investigation's news spread. There will be an increase in the number of criminal motorcycle gangs, corrupt gas stations, and underground economies based on fuel supply. The Night Serpents had done more than start a criminal enterprise, they had laid the groundwork for others to follow. Torres informed Chen, this is bigger than one gang, as they studied new data. They were able to find and take full advantage of a hole in society's defenses. There may be a comparable operation at every gas station. As more connections were found, the investigation grew. At first glance, it seemed like a straightforward protection racket, but as more evidence surfaced, the complexity became apparent. The Night Serpent's clubhouse basement was the site of an encrypted server farm, which the FBI's cyber section uncovered, leading to the breakthrough. This goes beyond a criminal organization operating protection rackets, as the head IT analyst stated. Using credit card transactions from gas stations, they developed a complex data mining operation. The analysts brought up screen after screen of data, and Torres and Chen watched. With each transaction, timestamp, and loyalty card gathered by the Night Serpents was everything. They have meticulously documented the whereabouts of thousands of individuals by monitoring their gas purchases and trips to convenience stores. Check out these algorithms. Lines of code were highlighted by the analyzer. Based on when cops purchased coffee, they could foretell how the police would patrol. By tracking the judge's fuel expenditures, they learned their routines. Their members' visits to petrol stations were also used to track the activities of rival gangs. When shown the scope of the digital operation, Joey's eyes opened. He divulged the app that we had on our phones. Communication wasn't the only purpose. Their database was automatically updated whenever we checked in at a station. No one was ever in the dark about their whereabouts. Nobody could have predicted how far-reaching the technology would be. Covert cameras and card skimmers were installed in every gas station under supervision, and they were all transmitting data to a central server. It wasn't simply illegal businesses that the Night Serpents ran. They were keeping tabs on everyone. Observe this, Torres, Chen summoned her to her screen. On the security cameras, they had facial recognition software. A user's face, purchase, and vehicle were all recorded in the system every time they refueled. They meticulously documented every individual within their domains. As soon as the technical evidence was presented, Shade collapsed. He confessed that it began modestly. Simply following the whereabouts of rivals. But then we noticed the sheer volume of data passing via these nodes. It felt like spies were lurking around every corner, only instead of people they were gas stations and credit card scanners. The level of complexity shocked the forensic accountants at the FBI. According to one of them, it wasn't as simple as money laundering. Their processes were being optimized with the help of machine learning. Some stations were more likely to be raided than others, and the system could even tell which customers may be undercover police or which businesses were easy targets. As they deciphered the online web, Danny's technical expertise came in handy. According to him, the loyalty card scheme was really brilliant. People gave the Night Serpents personal information about their routines, relationships, and habits while thinking they were saving money on gas. The inquiry revealed a web of computer programmers who were collaborating with the criminal organization. These were no hoodlums. They were expert programmers who had built bespoke software to monitor, forecast, and manage data and monetary flows. What Agent Thompson found most concerning was the fact that they were able to incorporate legal business software into their illicit activities, as he informed Torres. Surveillance data was continuously being fed into their database from what appeared to be ordinary point-of-sale systems. The technological assistance from Senator Morrison was crucial. He disclosed that they had contacted him regarding the implementation of new payment systems. Reasoned that it would improve productivity. Unbeknownst to me, they were compiling profiles of each and every gas client in their territory. The Night Serpents had meticulously mapped out neighborhood links using gas station trips, according to the cyber unit's discovery. They have complete knowledge on who purchased gas, when, and where. They were able to spot trends, foretell actions, and take advantage of weak spots. According to what Chen mentioned during the briefing, this goes beyond organized crime. This is a form of structured monitoring. All the petrol stations were transformed into data collecting points, every transaction was transformed into intelligence, and every consumer was made into an unwitting informant. The gang's technical acumen clarified their remarkable ability to evade authorities. Their point-of-sale networks were equipped with early warning systems, and they were aware of police patterns. They were also able to anticipate raids. Techs kept pulling data out of the confiscated servers as Torres looked on. She noted that they expanded beyond establishing a criminal empire. In the guise of gas prices and convenience shop sales, they constructed a digital panopticon. The ramifications were enormous. Each and every security camera, loyalty program, and credit card swipe. For the purpose of obtaining criminal intelligence, they had all been armed. Not only did the Night Serpents have complete control over the area, they had also digitally mapped it, monitoring all movements through their compromised gas station network. Urgent evaluations of comparable systems across the country were prompted by the finding. Other gangs might easily follow suit if one group succeeded in converting petrol stations into surveillance hubs. A criminal operation and a security hole in the infrastructure of modern civilization were both unearthed during the investigation. More concerning trends surfaced as the cyber unit persisted with their investigation. A black market for community information was established by the Night Serpents through the sale of surveillance data acquired through apparently innocuous gasoline purchases to other criminal organizations. As the controversy loomed over the entire local administration, the mayor convened an emergency meeting of the municipal council. Torres informed the assigned task team that half of the council members refueled at Night Rider-controlled stations, and that each and every one of them had their whereabouts monitored, habits recorded, and vulnerabilities identified. In politics, the domino effect was accelerating. 3 members of the city council had already left by morning. It was announced that 2 state representatives will not be seeking re-election. Hundreds of convictions could have been tainted as a result of the analysis of Judge Hamilton's whole case history. As Chen demonstrated the surveillance film to the federal prosecutors, they did more than simply gather data. Their usage of it was significant. It seems like every politician that pulled over for gas was suddenly a target. Their routines, weaknesses, and schedules were all known to the Night Serpents. The blackmail operation was flawless. The extent of political corruption was revealed by Senator Morrison's confession. During inquiry, he disclosed that they had approached me at a gas station and shown me printouts of all my petrol purchases, stops, and usage in the past year. Even my wife was unaware of several details of my routine that they knew. A whole floor of the federal building was occupied by the FBI's unit investigating political corruption. Posters depicted the interconnections between bribed lawmakers and the gas stations owned by Night Serpents. Public authorities were linked to particular places, transactions, and compromises by red strings. Agent Thompson clarified during a briefing that the pattern remained constant. At their usual petrol stations, they would approach officials, demonstrate their knowledge, promise security, and then demand favors. Individuals were already ensnared when they became aware of the situation. Joey's evidence regarding graft in politics was very damning. As he informed the prosecutors, we had a list. Each and every politician, judge, and council member who purchased gas inside our jurisdiction. Who could be turned, who needed to be destroyed, and who was vulnerable was all known to us. Behind the gang's macho facade was a complex political operation, as the inquiry made clear. They had established a shadow government utilizing petrol stations as a network for intelligence gathering, in addition to a criminal operation. Chen urged everyone to examine the voting patterns by pointing to the electoral maps. This pattern was consistent across all districts where Night Serpents had control of the gas station. By manipulating the number of people who felt secure enough to drive to the polls, they could essentially influence local elections. The political plan was validated by Shade's testimony. According to him, it had nothing to do with the cash. It was about power, really, and not merely the money. Have complete control over all aspects of the situation, including the petrol stations and the politicians. Political repercussions extended beyond the confines of the city. State party officials were frantically trying to separate themselves from officials who had been compromised. You were getting your money back for your campaign. A growing awareness of the Night Riders' sway caused political coalitions to dissolve. Torres noted, in examining the evidence, that they were unnecessary to stuff vote boxes. Managing the level of safety for gas purchases in specific areas could have an impact on elections. Tucked down behind the guise of gas prices was voting suppression via intimidation. The Federal Bureau of Investigations deciphered messages sent and received by gang bosses and political advisors. In addition to extorting politicians, the Night Serpents had been instrumental in controlling local politics through their network of petrol stations. With his assistance in locating political ties, Danny's responsibilities grew. Throughout his campaign, he made it clear that gas stations were the focal point of every venue. There was a pattern. The local political landscape was in the hands of the Night Serpents. Through its compromised officials, the gang had twisted zoning restrictions, as discovered by the investigation. They might regulate the distribution of gasoline over entire areas, stop rivals from building gas stations, and make current ones sell. Torres was informed by Agent Thompson that this isn't limited to venal politicians. With the use of fuel and terror, they built a political machine. With each gas station transaction came a new data point and the possibility of a new control mechanism. As Judge Hamilton divulged further information, his emotional collapse persisted. He broke down in tears as he asked questions, and they knew everything, where I refilled my gas tank, who I crossed paths with, and when I bought coffee. They made me feel like my habits were working against me. New political ramifications kept piling up. Investigators looking into campaign finances found that the Night Serpents had been using gas station loyalty programs to launder money, converting fuel points into anonymous political donations. Torres saw another lawmaker led handcuffed out of the station. She informed Chen that their empire was founded on a straightforward reality. Natural gas is essential for all living things. Take charge of it, and you'll have command over everything. Democracy included. Realizing the extent to which the Night Serpents had an impact sent shockwaves through the city's economy. A huge criminal enterprise used local gas stations as fronts, and as a result, banks were blocking accounts, companies were going out of business, and entire neighborhoods found out. The financial crime specialist from the FBI told Torres it's like yanking a sweater thread. We find 10 new suspicious patterns for every transaction that we trace. They had complete influence over the local economy, not simply the petrol stations. There had been reports of economic terrorism, and local company owners were speaking out. One restaurant owner said that deliveries started to experience difficulty if customers didn't use their gas stations. Your consumers would discover their vehicles damaged, and your suppliers would have disruptions. Any company that didn't comply with their regulations was eventually stifled. How extensive the economic control was, Chen learned. She urged Torres to examine the property records, laying out maps on her desk. Anytime they seized control of a gas station, the value of properties within a 3-block radius would decrease. Night serpents shell firms would purchase whatever that people sold for cheap. Not only did they seize control of stations, but entire communities as well. Joey's evidence exposed the complex financial plan. He elaborated by saying that the petrol stations were only the start. Everything else could be controlled once we managed the delivery of gasoline. Do you wish to manage a cab company? We are the best gas retailer. Are you interested in running a delivery service? Very much so. Those stations were the foundation of their economy. Financial deception was being uncovered by the FBI's forensic accountants. A parallel economy had been established by the night serpents, who had taken advantage of gas stations as banks, fuel purchases as currency, and fear as an interest rate. Recognize these trends? The head accountant indicated the books of account. They planned to buy out failing firms with the increased income from artificially high gas prices in specific areas. Under the cover of fuel price controls, it was economic warfare. Particulars of the business scheme were divulged by Shade in his confession. He conceded that we didn't merely accept protection money. Who could do trade in our domains was something we decided upon. Those gas stations were the hubs of the economy. Money, repayment, fines. It functioned as our exclusive financial network. The effect for lawful companies was catastrophic. In the midst of apparently innocuous gas station transactions, businesses were finding out that fuel credit cards had been compromised, delivery routes tracked, and operations penetrated. Torres observed another company owner deliver a speech. They had a perfect plan to harm you. The woman sobbed as she gave the explanation. Just enough to cut into your profits, raise gas costs. Just enough delivery delay to drive clients away. There would be no need to ever make a direct threat because they could ruin any firm. The night serpent's manipulation of real estate markets was exposed by the probe. They might buy out entire communities through shell businesses by limiting gasoline access, making some areas uninhabitable and driving down property values. Its understatement was its brilliance. Representative Thompson made a statement. Take charge of the economy and the gas stations. We can't survive without fuel. When it comes to vehicles, shipping, and company operations. They made a weapon out of that fundamental need. Danny was helpful in revealing monetary control tendencies. A decision has to be made by every company operating within their jurisdictions, he said. Either you pay exorbitant pricing at night rider petrol stations or your business will inevitably fail. People choose to pay in the majority. Businesses were not the only ones affected by the economic downturn. Areas under the jurisdiction of night rider stations saw a precipitous decline in property values. Lenders were requesting repayments. Rates were going up at insurance firms. A number of neighborhoods' whole economic systems were starting to fall apart. Chen noted, while going over financial documents, that they didn't merely establish a criminal enterprise. They created a parallel economic system, concealed behind gas station receipts, complete with its own set of regulations, currency, and enforcement mechanism. The gang's manipulation of fuel prices to suppress company rivalry was revealed in the federal inquiry. They could essentially choose which firms would thrive in their territory by manipulating prices at different stations. Torres spoke with a small fleet operator whose company was wiped out, who was another victim. He clarified that they need not have threatened me explicitly. Simply put, they created it so that fuel could no longer be purchased at reasonable prices. When compared to your competitors, your fuel expenses are 30% greater. How does this affect your delivery service? As more links were revealed, the economic dominoes kept falling. A huge illegal economy was taking place, and legitimate enterprises were learning the hard way that their apparently routine fuel purchases had gotten them involved. To find trends they may have overlooked, local banks were now going over transaction records dating back years. At this point, it was risky to use a credit card at any night rider station. There is a possible connection between criminal behavior and every fuel purchase. No one had anticipated the extent to which the community impact would be so severe. People in whole neighborhoods started to learn that the petrol stations in their area, which were before seen as important gathering places, had actually been used for monitoring and control. While studying community impact assessments, Torres informed Chen that many are reluctant to buy petrol. They are unaware of the secure stations and the potentially compromised transactions. Some people are ditching their cars altogether in favor of buses and other public transportation. As people recounted experiences of control and intimidation, local houses of worship and community centers became gathering places for those in need. This group's influence was completely unexpected, according to one prominent member of the community. They had complete control over petrol pricing, as well as who could work, live in particular areas, and travel. Now Danny was in charge of community outreach events, where he taught locals how to spot suspicious activity at their own stations. Keep an eye out for any unexpected staff changes, he said. Find any suspicious locations for security cameras. Take note if any clients appear to be able to influence the real workers. Unsettling trends in community movement were uncovered by Chen. Some viewership categories would begin to dwindle whenever the night serpents assumed control of a station. Because they could regulate who felt secure buying gas, they could influence neighborhood demographics. The inquiry exposed the gang's pervasive presence in the neighborhood. Even while they purported to support the areas they donated to, gathered intelligence on those same towns through their gas stations, all while sponsoring Little League teams, schools, and charities. Agent Thompson showcased a calendar showcasing upcoming neighborhood events. Their stations were strategically placed to be the closest fuel source at every festival, procession, and gathering. They transformed community events into chances to collect data. Details of community manipulation were presented in Joey's testimony. He admitted that we were aware of everyone's financial situation, family issues, and vulnerabilities. We were able to see into the lives of every family at the petrol stations. As she described the effect on the neighborhood, Shade sobbed. As he confessed, we didn't only pocket their cash. Freedom was taken from them. Because we regulated the availability of gasoline, people were unable to go where they pleased in terms of shopping, living arrangements, and transportation. As a result of the night riders' influence, Torres spoke with families who had to relocate. Their presence rendered our neighborhood inhabitable, according to one mother. There was an increase in gas prices, a halt in deliveries, and then the closure of enterprises. Our neighborhood was robbed by them. The toll on public health was starting to show as doctors noted an uptick in stress-related ailments in the impacted areas. People were always on edge because they had no idea that their ordinary trip to the gas station might turn them into targets. During a briefing, Chen noticed that they turned community connections into a weapon. They used their network of stations to record every single PDA meeting, church service, and neighborhood watch. Who they met with, where they went, and whether or not they were being organized against was all known to them. Patterns of communal control were helped identify by Danny. According to him, they did more than that. Meetings in convenience stores, conversations at the pumps, they monitored it all. There was a community surveillance center-like atmosphere at every station. The inquiry revealed the night serpents' manipulation of local groups. To manipulate the demographics of their communities, they would use petrol price differentials to favor some groups while driving others away. It was becoming clear to local schools that fuel card programs, bus routes, and staff movements had all been affected. The gang had scouted out families and children who were particularly susceptible to exploitation using this data. Now prominent members of the community were coming forward with accounts of covert manipulation. One preacher elucidated how they would volunteer to underwrite local gatherings. That is, unless individuals filled up at specific gas stations. Every neighborhood meeting became a command center for them. Another neighborhood meeting descended into wrath and tears as Torres observed. A resident stated that they didn't only embezzle our funds. Our feeling of belonging was taken from us. Even a trip to the gas station is too risky because we don't trust the local businesses, our neighbors, or the gas itself. The effect on people's mental health was significant. A criminal operation was getting information from people's everyday routines, informal discussions at the pump, and loyalty card usage. Anxiety and paranoia have been on the rise, according to local counselors. According to one therapist, people are questioning everything. Each and every one of the gas station's helpful clerks, surveillance cameras, and price adjustments. It wasn't only fuel that the night serpents controlled, they also controlled tranquility. The city was beginning to recover, but the long road to recovery was showing how deep the wounds were. While the red strings indicated criminal ties, Torres stood at her evidence board and began to add green strings to reflect recovery attempts. Chen pointed to this while going over fresh reports. A number of gas station cooperatives are springing up in various communities. They're reclaiming power by establishing fuel stops that are owned by the community. Observing antibodies fend against an illness is akin to that. Assisting communities in reclaiming their stations, the FBI's community outreach staff was putting in extra hours. According to Agent Thompson, we're not merely apprehending lawbreakers. We're doing our part to restore faith. A new sign of recovery is unlocked with each station we clear. Danny was now representing the rehabilitation program. Many found inspiration in the narrative of the young officer who played a key role in solving the crime. At a neighborhood gathering, he explained that it's about more than just gas now. It's about taking back our communities, one stop at a time. Business owners in the area were taking the lead in establishing a system of accredited safe Tat-ions that would be openly owned and monitored by the community. There were stringent requirements for pricing, background checks, and security at each site. Torres instructed her staff to keep an eye on the situation as she pointed to a city map. Small businesses always seem to make a triumphant return whenever we eliminate the night rider influence at a station. Observing a neighborhood come alive is akin to that. Digital recovery was an integral part of the physical rehabilitation process. Stations were receiving assistance from IT professionals in cleaning up infected systems, implementing new security measures, and developing trustworthy, open operating protocols. The recovery operations reaped unanticipated rewards from Joey's involvement. Thanks to his insider knowledge, authorities were able to compile a thorough cleanup checklist for each place by identifying minor evidence of illegal involvement. Early warning systems were being developed using Shade's testimony. According to Chen, we are manipulating their own approach in their favor. They can now be identified by every red flag that they use to penetrate the stations. Neighbors would congregate to support newly cleared spots at Reclaim Our Stations gatherings organized by community leaders. Symbols of community resilience, these petrol stations had evolved into something more than that. Could you make out this pattern? Recent data was cited by Torres. Local property values begin to level out once each station is eliminated. Road safety is a top priority for the public. Companies come back. Witnessing a community resuscitate is an evocative experience. Probably the most important was the psychological healing. According to counselors, individuals' anxiety levels diminished once stations were cleansed and declared secure. Buying gas was a basic task that was starting to feel natural again. Danny collaborated with the owners of the stations to establish new procedures for community involvement. He stressed the need of being forthright. The community must be informed of all price changes, security camera installations, and personnel hires. The local educational institutions were developing curricula centered on community alertness, instructing pupils to identify indicators of criminal influence while steering clear of paranoia. There was a fine line to walk between being vigilant and being afraid. After a smooth transfer from night rider control to community ownership, Torres spoke with a station owner who had made the leap. He enthusiastically emphasized that today we publish our works to the public. Anyone may see every single purchase, shipment, and price change. Some hit communities and unanticipated strengths were emerging as a result of the rebuilding effort. People in the area were forming support groups, forming their own monitoring committees, and coming up with crime alert systems. Chen made the astute observation that communities are transforming their vulnerabilities into strengths. The night serpents are repurposing all of their control tactics into means of empowering the community. Across the country, people were talking about community resiliency after the inquiry. In an effort to better defend their own communities against crime rings like Cedar Grove's, other communities were researching the latter's recovery approach. In an effort to aid impacted companies in their recovery, local banks were setting up special programs to provide low-interest loans for things like system replacements and security enhancements. The economy gradually recovered. Under community supervision, Torres saw another station reopen. The rally was about more than simply gas costs and accessibility, it was about recovering a part of the community's identity that had been eroded by corruption and intimidation. Laura Torres, a vibrant and active individual, stood at the petrol pump where it all started, 1 year after that fateful night. A plaque honoring the events that began here and community artwork adorning the walls gave the station a new, more open, and cheerful appearance. Joined by her partner, Chen expressed her disbelief that a year had passed. Without fear or suspicion, they observed the customers coming and going. With their commanders in prison for lengthy terms and their criminal empire demolished, the night serpents vanished. Danny, who was now fully trained as a detective, had recently concluded instructing yet another lesson on community awareness. He announced that they had found the same characteristics in 12 additional cities. We have learned how to recognize and prevent the gas station takeover model, which appears to be a widespread tactic used by criminals. A thorough investigation was concluded by the FBI. With almost 200 arrests, millions of dollars in confiscated assets, and a new perspective on how criminal organizations could penetrate communities through vital services, Cedar Grove became a preventive model. At a nationwide convention for law enforcement, Agent Thompson spoke. Following his evidence that contributed to the conviction of the whole Night Serpent's leadership, Joey had sought witness protection. Police academies around the nation had begun requiring his in-depth analysis of their technique. Shade, who is currently serving a reduced sentence for his collaboration, had contributed to the development of new gas station security measures, put their expertise to use protecting people rather than exploiting them, as proposed by Torres, and the plan was bearing fruit. When it came to protecting its residents, the city had changed its strategy. There was a community oversight board at each gas station today. Price adjustments necessitated openness. The original intent of security systems was to prevent harm to consumers, not to spy on them. Chen remarked, "Look at these numbers," as he reviewed the most recent statistics. Formerly controlled neighborhoods saw a precipitous decline in crime, a rebound in property prices, and the reopening of businesses. At last, the city's pall of terror was beginning to dissipate. Near the same pump where Torres had approached Reeves a year prior, Torres saw a mother assuredly allowing her adolescent daughter to practice parking. The true triumph was in these ordinary, everyday moments. Law enforcement has also been impacted by the gas station case. Essential service monitoring was being re-evaluated by departments around the country. Unanticipated weaknesses in the Night Serpent's methods had been uncovered. There was a national upsurge in Danny's community awareness initiatives. Gas stations, he said, could be both oppressive symbols and instruments of community power. He was asked to speak about this topic often. There was no break in the economic recovery. For the impacted companies, banks have developed tailored plans. To counter the threat of criminals gaining access to critical systems, insurance companies have introduced new coverage. The thing that's truly remarkable is, as he observed the constant stream of customers, Chen pondered why something as mundane as filling up the gas tank grew to represent danger or independence. These gas stations now offer more than simply gasoline. They show that communities can recover lost property. Much had changed in the political sphere. Transparency and fuel pricing were mandated by new laws. The ownership of each station had to be made public. All vital services were compelled to undergo community monitoring. Torres thought back on the beginning. A criminal enterprise was uncovered during one ordinary gas station stop. The simplest moments can often lead to the most significant cases. She spoke to a class of brand new police officers. Being prepared for those occasions is all that's required. Beyond the arrests and convictions, the case left an indelible mark. Communities' perspectives on safety had shifted as a result. Company security strategies. What measures were taken by law enforcement to safeguard vital services? A lesson on community vigilance was soon to be a part of the school curriculum in the area. In this lesson, kids learned that it's important to be both vigilant and scared. Concerning the significance of communal control and ownership. The lands once inhabited by the night serpents have transformed into examples of community strength. Transparency had been transformed from surveillance by the neighborhood. Turn command into collaboration. Anxieties into power. You were right, Agent Thompson informed Torres during the remembrance that took place a year ago. Arresting criminals was never the only goal. The objective was to demonstrate to communities that they could stand up, recover what was taken from them, and transform their weaknesses into strengths. The original gas station had become something of an unofficial landmark. People would come to observe the site of a community's escape from oppression. The act of purchasing gas has transformed into a bold declaration of resistance against coercion. A familiar face caught Torres' eye as she got ready to depart. The lady whose daughter had been the target of a night serpent's threat 12 months prior. No one else would ever have to experience that terror again thanks to the woman's new position on the community oversight board of the station. This wasn't only a case closing. It marked the start of a social movement. Everywhere you looked, people were learning that even the most mundane locations could be instruments of oppression or emblems of defiance. They were given the option.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.